Hey everybody, welcome to video 17.2. The topic here is going to be talking about how hormones are actually able to induce changes or induce something in a cell. Typically, you would see this in more of a biology 2 course or something similar, but it is really important since we're talking about the endocrine system here in chapter 17 that we go over this since it is very relevant. So you have two classes of hormones. You have the first one is your lipid soluble hormones. So lipid cellular hormones are going to rely on a receptor inside the cell or an intracellular hormone. These are going to include things like your steroid hormones. They're made of cholesterol, which means they are hydrophobic, and so they easily cross the phospholipid bilayer. Usually, with steroid hormones, they might bind in the cytosol or directly on the nucleus to generate a complex, which you have your hormone and your receptor bound together. So we have that hormone receptor complex here, which is then going to bind to a segment of the DNA. Thyroid hormones are going to use sodium as well as active transport in order to be able to pass through. And then they're going to bind to receptors which are already located and bound to DNA. But once that hormone binds to whatever the receptor is, whether it's in the cytosol or directly on the DNA already, it's going to trigger transcription of a gene to mRNA, if you remember transcription from biology. And once that mRNA segment has been transcribed, it's going to move to the cytosol and be translated by ribosomes into a protein. Again, just like we talked about transcription, translation in biology, the central dogma. And so it looks something like this. You have a hormone passing through the blood until it gets to its target cell, when it will leave the blood and enter the cell. Here you have the receptor hormone complex. So this blue here is the receptor, where it will then go and attach to the DNA in your nucleus, leading to transcription, giving you mRNA, going out to the cytosol, giving you translation, giving us the protein here. Everything on the bottom half of this image should be you should remember from biology class. Your other class of hormones are water soluble hormones. These are going to be unable to pass through the cell membrane. And so instead, they're going to bind to a receptor on the surface or on the membrane of the cell. All of your amino acid based hormones are going to rely on these cell membrane receptors. And so we call them first messengers, that hormone going and inducing the change. And then you're going to rely on a second messenger or a secondary messenger within the cell to carry that message to the nucleus to induce transcription and translation. The most common second messenger is CAMP, or cyclic adenosine monophosphate. You'll see CAMP in a lot of different cellular biology classes. So you start with the water soluble hormone binding to the surface receptor, which is going to activate what's called a G protein. That G protein is then going to activate adenyl cyclase. The adenyl cyclase is going to cause ATP to be converted to cyclic adenosine monophosphate. ATP, remember, is adenosine triphosphate. So it's not too much different than cyclic adenosine monophosphate here. But then that cyclic adenosine monophosphate is going to induce protein kinase within the cytosol to be activated so that a phosphorylation cascade can occur. You get all sorts of phosphates being added to various proteins from that phosphorylation cascade. That's kind of where it gets its name. So here, another diagram here, you have a water-soluble hormone in the blood leaving. It cannot pass through the cell membrane, so instead it binds to a receptor, which activates this G protein, which will then go and activate adenyl cyclase here, which is going to induce ATP to become cyclic AMP. And you're more than welcome to look up different diagrams of what ATP's chemical structure looks like compared to CAMP. You probably could even look at the intermediates and all the changes that take place in between here. But we get CAMP, which is our second messenger, which is going to activate a protein kinase, and that will eventually lead to this phosphorylation cascade where all these phosphates get added to proteins and activates those proteins. Okay. So very quick, since we are talking about the endocrine system and different hormones here, I wanted to add in these two classes of hormones and how they act. Again, this is more of a biology 2 type of routine here, but since we don't have that sort of class offered here, I did want to add it in. So you get a short little biology video.